the small town, we can find him.
Hi, Brian, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. We're giving it a couple more minutes. We're waiting for one more.
Looks like there should be a lot of.
Oh, it's so. Well, especially as you get older. Like, oh, one more thing I have to get rid of.
So somebody had a piece of string right there. 70s.
70s, yeah. I don't know this guy did. Woodworkers. It's up in-
You were there before.
Yeah.
I need to send the chief out.
And,
I need to send the chief out.
it cost me- oh, that's right. Nice to meet you.
Am I?
Great travel.
So. Heavy stuff on the backside, that's just information only. Administrative report, charter discussion, that. Want to start and work backwards, I can work on.
I'll get our non-action items out.
Yeah, starting with, yeah, start, or update.
All that stuff first.
Right, and I'll work on.
Yes, he's-
You need them for this one, right? This, there's not a time, I just,
Friday, some friends that we stayed with.
the code, criminal code.
No, there's.
Friday up here.
No time.
There was about 3 or 4 other friends.
I can get us. If I can.
They were pressed for food.
Oh, you
That's
could.
their
Oh.
state.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you to send that over.
Yeah, yeah, I
Hi,
guess
John.
just announce, announce what the new amended.
We ready to go then?
Let's stay right here and.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to open the July 12th Coburg City Council meeting.
Sammy, do you have a roll call, please?
Absent is Marcus Alexander, Kyle Blaine, and John Fox. And then we have Counselor Bell, Mayor Smith, John Lehman, and Patty McConnell present. We do not have a quorum.
Given that we do not have a quorum, we will move to the information only part of the administrative report once we begin. At this time, I'd like to have everybody stand. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Justice for all.
Yeah. Sammy, agenda review, or do you want to wait until we possibly have a quorum?
I'll go ahead and do it. We just have for administrative reports at the end, since we'll be skipping forward. Addition to the city administrator report, which is agenda item 12. There are the bullet lists from our planner. And then additionally, you have an agenda item, which is now number 10.5. And that's the charter review and discussion. That'll be presented by Ann Heath.
Okay, thank you. Mayor's comments. As most of you know, I've been busy with a life-changing situation with my health. And fortunately, I'm glad to report that I'm doing really well right now. I will start my second round of treatment, and I've felt pretty close to normal after losing an awful lot of muscle mass and other body weight that I couldn't afford to lose. So slowly building that back up and trying to get my bucket list in order and put my priorities together. With that being said, I felt it prudent that tonight I announced that I will not be running for re-election. I think it's only fair to the community that other people know that this opening without me being the only one. I ran the last two elections unopposed, and I would hate for our city to. So I think in fairness to everybody, I just want you to know that I will not be running for re-election, and I'm hoping to get people on the ballot and get a mayor duly elected into this position at the end of the year. We have special guests. There you go. Oh, citizen testimony. Nobody signed up for citizen testimony. Thank you. Now we'll go to special guests. And I have to forgive me because I'm hop skipping through things that require action with a quorum of a council. So give me a moment to get through them all. Russ Hayworth and Tracy Pugh for Oregon Main Street.
Well, hardworking. We're going to be excited to bring and host a lot of events into Coburg, bring a lot of energy to the community, a lot of business to the local community and the businesses here. And it's a neat organization that doesn't require a membership to join or pay into or anything like that. It's purely voluntary, and we just want to get not the pressure of being a member. People can come with us from ideas all over the spectrum, and I think it's one of the necessary things we came up with was getting a map and brochure that Tracy's going to pass out now. These are hot off the press, but basically showcasing the core downtown and surrounding areas, the businesses, with a neat map, interactive map, and then a link to all the businesses there. There's just a ton of information in this folder that we're so excited to finally have something tangible that we can put our hands on and get into all kinds of different venues, be it the Travel Lane County, perhaps the Eugene Airport. A lot of businesses will have these, and as people come into town, they'll be able to grab one of these, and basically it's almost like having keys to the city. It really showcases everybody. I don't think we left too many people out, but it's mainly the businesses that are retail. It's stores, restaurants, shops. You can see the list there, and highlighting some of the events that we have coming up. It's so nice to be able to put things on the schedule now and actually know that we're going to do them. We're excited to have Music in the Park beginning next week on Thursday, the 21st, and continuing through July and August. And with that, I think I'm going to let Tracy talk about the new website development that I got a glimpse of today, and it's really neat and exciting. And the, what do you call that? The QR code? QR code, excuse me. Yeah, that actually works. I checked it with my phone, and it brings you right up to the website. So it's pretty neat. But I'll let her talk about that. That's kind of her thunder. And we appreciate this opportunity tonight.
We're able to, with Main Street now being a nonprofit, but in conjunction with kind of working with the chamber, and as the chambers kind of dissolved and going into Main Street, we were able to use the hosted website of the chamber, and I've turned it into Coburg Main Street. You are still able to go to the website if you go to Coburg Chamber, but it is Main Street as well, which is great. And what I've done with it is listed all the events that happen during the year. What I would also like to add is a calendar that shows, like when we had the bikes that came through town. So smaller events that aren't necessarily hosted by Main Street, the city, the Grange. We would still like to have those on there just so the community knows what's happening in town. Like when they see all these cyclists coming through, they know that, oh, this is such and such event. So that is in process. I'm still working on, but I just posted today all the businesses, the downtown businesses, restaurants and shops, as well as nonprofit, city services. And there was one other category I think I put on there. Oh, just other businesses, the main businesses such as Hayworth or Chiefs or Coburg Pizza has their logo, their website, their hours and their address. And then the other businesses that are more like Ryan Thomas Construction or K&A Engineering that don't necessarily have visitors going in. I just listed their name, their phone number, and their website. So trying to break that up. So it's been fun working on. There's still more to be done on it, but I think it's kind of up and going so that people can start having one spot where they can go and find out what the events are, find out who the downtown businesses are. And I'd also like to start adding outlying businesses as well. The Main Street Art Committees did some painting of the bike hub. So if you saw the handprint signs, and just painted on the inside as well to add a little bit more color. And then now that we have the downtown map, I'm going to blow that up and put that in the bike hub and the visitor kiosk, as well as a bike map that will go in there. So I'm going to get that laminated this week and put that in there. And then Patty is also on the art committee. And so she did the wildflowers that are there across from Hayworth, that where the old mural used to be, proposed mural, and where it says, welcome to Coburg. And she's also created one for the fall that has pumpkins that says, welcome to Coburg. So the art committee's been working on that. We've got our signage at the ends of town. In the fall, we'll have the scarecrows back up. Our next big project is wayfinding signage to have, so people both driving and walking through town will see that there's more shops to the back on Mill Street, that Norma Pfeiffer Park is back there, where the bike hub is, that there's businesses to the south end, because they feel like everybody gets put to the north end. And so they'd like some signage to direct people to the other end, where I guess Willamette Forks will go in, and Covered Pizza, Blingy Barn, there's other businesses down there. So those are some upcoming projects we're working on. One thing we talked about in our exec committee today was maybe doing a monthly or a weekly not a newsletter, but email to businesses, letting them know about what's happening in town other than the big events that are going on. So I would email out and say, there's a bike race happening, or there's jamming in the park that's happening this week, because they may not be aware since they're not being put on by local organizations here in Coburg. We had a mixer at Hayworth with Oregon Rain, bringing in businesses and talking to entrepreneurs and giving them information from Oregon Rain. And we'd like to start doing that quarterly, where we bring in downtown businesses and just have a time for them to mingle and talk and find out what's going on in the community, getting to know each other. I've also been working on coordinating the market. We'll be in conjunction with concerts in the park starting next week. And we would like to get more art in town. Hopefully we'll get some murals going. And I think that's about all that's happening right now. Yes.
Is there a link to the Main Street website from the Coburg home website?
From the cities, there is not, but I will add that. Thank you for that reminder. I think there's a link to Oregon Main Street, but we need to add one now. There is, actually, I take that back. The chamber is listed on the city's website. So if someone clicked on that, that would take them to the Main Street. But I will update that to say Coburg Main Street now. Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions or comment or feedback? What we're doing?
I think one of the
Thank you.
things too that I'd like to add in just at the end here is the preserving the history and incorporating the history and the heritage that Coburg has. A lot of towns in Oregon, this really is, I think, one of the first and foremost towns that really has hung on to that and preserved it, promoted it, incorporated it into their logos, and incorporated it into their events that we have and things like that. So I think, be it website, be it events that we have, we want to maintain that connection to that great history that this town has. And I think some.
And I did forget to mention, we did create a logo for Coburg Main Street, and it's kind of small here, but if you look inside the brochure, we did incorporate the penny farthing bike. There's 2 lampposts, kind of a downtown scene, and I will get a bigger copy to all of you so you're able to see that better. But so we've been busy and we're making good progress, and we thank you for the opportunity to give you an update tonight. And I'm just excited to be part of Coburg and this community. So thank you.
Both of you, and you're always welcome to bring an update to us. Like communication. And I think I told you guys in the meeting itself, but I think Coburg Main Street is probably going to be one of the biggest things in 20 years as far as making things happen in the community. I think we've got a great leadership team and some really enthusiastic people that are putting stuff forward. So I'm really looking forward to being a part of that group as a member and participant.
Awesome.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Do you have an update, or are we going to continue with the non-action items?
I don't think we're going to have a quorum tonight, so they're trying to talk about that with city attorney as far as hearings and things like that. But we would just move on with information only items this time.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8. So moving to item 8, that's a non-action item, administrative information reports. And to item 8.
Mr. Mayor, that is for me tonight, and I was talking to Sammy a few minutes ago. I'd really like to put both of these off until the August meeting, so the full city council can hear what I have to say about it.
Is that, you're referring to both as the water report and the industrial noise solution issue?
No, 8 is the TMDL and the water, the CCR, the
Oh, okay,
Consumer Confidence Report.
so just the ones on the water report.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Without objection? So done. You're free and clear on that one, Brian.
Until next month.
Kenny, do we have an update yet?
I'm working with Ann Davies on getting the public hearings. You're going to have to open the public hearings. It does not look like we will have a quorum tonight. We will be transferring our work to the meeting on the 27th and, excuse me, the 26th, next Tuesday. There'll be a lot of stuff, the backside that Ann and I need to figure out. But in order to have the public hearings that are already noticed for tonight's meeting, you're going to have to open them and carry them over. So
Right.
we're figuring out those logistics.
Well, we'll continue with the non-action items until you guys have counted it all out, right? Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to agenda item 9, which is 81 in the packet.
Good evening. This agenda item is regarding a noise in the industrial area of town. The city frequently gets complaints from that area from residents. We do have a residential neighborhood abutting the industrial zone. There is buffer zones for most of it, so there's required buffer zones. And so, but there are some areas that even with the buffer zones, sometimes the noise level can get pretty high. We have a specific neighborhood, Sarah Lane, where the Sarah Lane water towers are, where that is where the majority of our complaints come from. And so the staff decided that we would consider having a noise specialist come out and do a study and give us some ideas on how we could fix the noise possibly for that neighborhood. So we asked a sound expert to come out. He took a look at the area and he did make some recommendations that the city could provide a sound fence that would hang on the existing fence around the water towers. He felt like it was very possible that the metal reservoirs were providing an echo, possibly from a lot of the noises that are happening are metal. So metal on metal, and that possibly that is bouncing off the water towers and then being pushed into the neighborhood. So there is a bid attached to this for providing sound walls in a phased in position. So he basically what he'd said is that he would suggest that we consider just doing phase 1 and 2 and seeing how that goes. And if we needed to go to phase 3. And the total for all 3 phases would be $33,000. And there are pictures in this packet of what a sound wall looks like. It would also probably increase the security or around the water tower just by blocking the view in. The piece that the policy consideration that I wanted the council to think about is that this isn't the only residential neighborhood that abuts industrial. And if you made the decision to provide a sound wall for one area of town, you may then be asked to provide it across the board in any of those areas that have that same circumstance. I do believe this is a special circumstance. I don't think water towers exist all over town. And those water towers are very much abutted up against that neighborhood. So the council could consider that we would do this for this neighborhood, but each and every neighborhood would have to be considered separately. Or you have a council decision that says, we're going to rely on what the zoning code says for when you build an industrial zone and what kind of buffering has to take place. And if that has been met, then we're not going to get in the middle of that decision. So it really is a council, because it becomes a policy decision. I feel that it makes sense that the council discuss this and talk about how they might want to move forward with it. And again, all of the information is in the packet. This was asking for staff direction. I'm not sure they can give staff direction tonight. I'm not clear on that. So
You can't make a motion.
you can't.
Pass a motion.
You can give opinions and you can ask that it come back. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding this, and staff can note your opinions and discussion on it.
I believe one of the big relevant issues is the city-owned property that may be adding to the problem. Whereas other industrial parks or buffer zones aren't necessarily city property. We've already basically asked the private property owner to mitigate the noise issues and put their own sound walls up. That not working, and our city property being possibly a part of that problem, is very different than if you go anywhere else in town and there's no city-owned property next to it that needs mitigation. To have a policy that says, yeah, if we're adding to it or potentially adding to it, then we should be doing something like this. Otherwise, no, it goes just like all other properties. The property owners themselves need to deal with that mitigation according to our noise standard.
Estimation or projection of what percentage of noise would be deadened or lessened by areas.
Yeah, Brian, are you still on the line?
I'm here.
Do you recall anything about a percentage of noise that would be reflected from these sound walls?
If I remember right, the one that far northernly fence, so at the water towers, I think on the map it shows that with a red line. That section would have been the first one that we would install and go from there. The sound reflecting or refracting off of the towers, if I remember right, he said would be minimal, especially if they're full. but the lion's share of the noise reduction would have come from that northern fence.
But you don't recall what percentage
don't.
of noise reduction it would be. Okay.
No.
I would just say that if we go forward with issuing the contract, that we have an independent evaluator of the noise from the company that's actually submitting the bid for it. And if they assess that the decimal level is 93, and that after the construction of phase 1, 2, and 3, we'll go to 42,
Okay.
then seems to be an acceptable reduction. We would support it. I'd like a clause in there that says if it's not down to 42, they must increase their work the level that they say that it will represent. In other words, I don't want to pay $33,000 to get a minimal improvement. I want to have it quantified and stipulated in the contract.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
I would also suggest that we don't move forward too quickly on this, though I agree with Counselor Lehman to get more information. But until we get the input back from the analysis on the existing reservoirs, in terms of, are we going to have to replace those, or what are we going to do? That isn't coming until September, I believe.
Okay. Yep. All right.
Betty, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add.
Well, there you have input from what's here.
Yes. Thank
That
you.
is great input.
I think so. Outstanding, I would even say.
All right. Have an executive session on that evening. So if we, yes, that's fine. Yep, that works for me. So this is an update on the discussion that we've been having for several months. The council, we had a work plan that reflected we would come back with funding scenarios for the council in the summertime. We have had a lot of discussion around this, several staff meetings with our engineers. And the problem that the staff is really struggling with is that right now the economy is so volatile. And to predict what is going to happen this year or next year or 5 years from now is very difficult for the staff. So what can we do? We can only provide projections to the best of our ability. We are facing a monumental increase in materials and services, 8% alone in June. And so when staff is asked whether the 3% in water and 1.5% in sewer is gonna do it, it is very hard for us to say yes. it's very hard for us to say, don't raise fees, because everything is on an upward climb. And this isn't something that's just happening in Coburg. If you're on other utility companies, you're getting letters saying the fees are going up, the cost of personal services is going up, materials and services are going up. And so staff has done the very best they can. So one of the things we've had to do is take a look at the amount of funding that we already have in place and look at what can we do with that funding? What can we get done? So we had a very good discussion about prioritizing projects. What is the most important thing we can do right now for the water system? So the third well is the most important thing we do. That's going to build that that water, what is the word I'm looking for? That extra water, that extra support of a water system. And so getting that well developed is our number one. Getting the main lines to the well is our number two. And actually, I'm sorry, that's part of number one, is hooking up to the main water system, which would happen down at the end by the fire station. Replacing aging main lines that continue to burst. So there are main lines in this town that keep our public works busy, and they need to be replaced. The cost of continuing to fix them is becoming just an expense that we don't want to continue to pay. Water projects within the collector system, the street system. So next summer, we will be constructing the roads in the collector system. And so we don't want to construct those roads and then go back 2 years later and dig them up so we can fix the pipes. We would rather fix the pipes in the same time frame that we fix the roads. So we're trying to align those projects. So those three things go to the top of what we need to get done in Coburg on the water system. And those are probably all we're going to get done with our funding at this time. The reservoir project, it can't even be included in the funding because when we added up what these three projects could cost us, it was all of what we have. We have decided to go ahead and do a new projection on costs at this time for these three projects. So the engineer is working on that. So we are providing, so where we are is that we can look at this point right now over the summer, have better answers for the council when we get the feasibility study back. Once we have that information, we can look out and say, okay, we're going to get these projects done, but the council also wants to do the reservoir project, and this is going to cost that. And so therefore, then we look at a 10 or 20-year outlook and say, do we need to raise fees? Absolutely, we will have to. Unless we're so lucky that we get something from the infrastructure bill that grants us the funds to do our reservoir. And we will try. We will try to get funding. So where we're at now is that staff has provided you scenarios, but I want to caution you that these scenarios are rough, and I don't want anybody hanging their hat on them. It's a bad idea to do that. So they look like this. They're in the packet. For wastewater, the outlook at 1.5. So these are 1.5 per year. I want to make sure that's clear to you, that we would be normally raising the rate 1.5% per year. Wastewater, actually, when I'm looking out 10 years, I get a little concerned because looming in the future is when the city can no longer depend on the URA to keep contributing to the sewer debt. And that happens around 2034. And so we're only allowed $9 million to be contributed to that. So when you look at a 2032 in the sewer department, it's not in the red at all. It's functioning, but in the next few years after that, you're going to see that drop off in the revenues. Now, things could happen between now and then. We could get a whole lot of SDC funds in. We could see some great growth that would cover all of the costs of the capital projects that might need to happen. So there are capital projects built into this that are substantially expensive. And maybe we won't have to do them fully, and maybe there will be growth in the city to cover them. So 10-year, that's why we do the 10-year lookout. So for sewer, I would keep it in the back of your mind that 1.5% might not be enough, but it might be fine. In water, when you look at a 3% water increase annually from 23 to 2032, at 2032, the water ending fund balance is looking pretty good with that 3%. It doesn't include any reservoir work at all. So that is not included in that because we don't even know what that's going to cost. So, so these are rough. I would love to tell you that I could provide you something closer. I just can't right now because I just don't know what's going to come out of the feasibility study. They may come back and say, you have no choice. You have to fix the reservoirs we have. Or they may say, the 2 reservoirs you have are fine. And, you know, you might be able to get by for a few years with them before you have to consider another reservoir. So, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding this. But I didn't want to give you nothing because I promised you something. I wish I could give you more. This has been probably the hardest projection I've done since I started working here because it's just a difficult one. So.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I definitely agree with the 3 priorities and making sure those get done. Second of all, I look at this a lot like the TUF. When we tried our transportation utility fee and spent 2 years actually trying to get that implemented. We came to a point where we didn't know what numbers we would need because we were still waiting for information. Sound familiar? We're doing the same thing. Then we were able to do a 5, I believe it was a 7 and a $10 comparison to see how much money could come in. Then when we got that end number of what we felt we would need, we were able to pick the right one out of that. And I think that's where we're at now. We don't have an end number. We're waiting for other information to come in to get that end number. But what this does, these 2 figures gives us something to say. What is 1.5%? Because I know without these, I don't know what 1.5% of the water budget to get through these projects is. This gives me an idea. I can look at it and see, well, we're making this much more per year because of it. And so when the final numbers do come in, there's no such thing as final numbers, but when the more solid numbers come in and we're able to look at that and say, okay, 1.5% will work for this, but 2.5% might work for the other or whatever. But at least we have a basis that we can say we know how much that generates. And again, other things could change the growth. We've got, you know, we've just recently expanded our urban growth down. He's got a 3% growth factor built in. That could change significantly pretty quickly. So I think it's good information, and I think it's what we need right now. I wouldn't expect any more. I think it gives us a good guide on what we're looking at in the future and what decisions we may have to make.
I have a question. Is that there's just 3 of us here tonight. Is there any way of getting kind of a synopsis of what you just told us to the other counselors? So, or will you just have to do this all over again when we all show up? that we
Um,
presented tonight?
I can ask them if they'd like to come in and sit down and try it that way, so that by September, you're all kind of filled in on where we're at.
It's being recorded in tape.
Mhm.
Can't we just direct the missing
Yeah.
counselors to at least view
Absolutely.
that part?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that'd be good.
They have their packets, so they have the same information written that you have. So yes, if they watch, that's a very good point.
Good idea.
Yes, sir.
Well, inflation is real. I have property in Salem. I just got a letter from the city of Salem that our water rates and our sewer rates are going up 5% each year for the next 2 years. Each fund, water and sewer, 5% each. Just housing rents. Senate Bill 608 gives 7% plus Portland CPI to be the amount of rent that can be charged in 1 year. So that actually somehow a formula comes down to 9.9%, but on a $1,000 rental unit, 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment is going up easily $100 a month. And so I think we need to say to our citizens, you know, a 1.5 and a 2 or 2.5% is well below what the cost of living is becoming. And we want to keep the rates as low as we can. That's why we're trying to project what it is that will meet those 3 or those 4 goals. But on the other hand, these are goals that this city needs, just much like what Tough needed to be able to put us on the road for the street repairs. I'm also thinking that if we did go with a 5% increase in water and sewer, which probably will meet the first 4 goals, is there, and it may not be a practical way, but it would certainly be a good public policy if it could be implemented logistically, is to say, we're charging what we need to charge for these projects. If we don't need it, is there any way that there can be rebates back to the public because it wasn't what we needed to collect?
Sure.
So it says to the public, you know, you're not gouging us and lining your coffers by getting a 5% and spending on whatever. You're doing it to do these 4 goals that we want done. And if we don't need the money for it, not only will we lower the rates in the ensuing years, but there could actually be a rebate back because the funds weren't necessary. And I think that could come across if it was packaged right, where citizens feel that we're being very responsible and watching our pennies and only charging what we need for these projects to be successfully implemented.
We did something similar. Since I've been in office, we've raised the rates once on the sewer and once on the water. Water, I believe, is $1.76. We raised the rates on the sewer $5. And because of our annual review policy and some sudden growth, the growth offset the need for the higher fees. In the next annual review, we rescinded that $5 increase. Now, the water system, it's been in effect for well over a year now, I believe, and it's $1.76. I think, number one, it's commendable that this city has kept those rates at that long for over 8 years. And I think our policy, our standing policy addresses what Councilor Lehman was talking about, that we look at it, and if all of a sudden we've got some growth again and it offsets that, then we look at it and we decide to draw back or do whatever needs to be done. We do that every year. And I think we've done it faithfully and honestly with deep concern for our citizens and what comes out of our pocket. And I think we can just continue that.
I remember the city is invested in platforms, 20-year platform, 20-year lookout platforms. And when I have all the facts, I can start feeding that information in. And that will tell us what we need to raise our rates to. And we can play with scenarios But that takes a work session. That can't happen at a council meeting.
I would just like to see that the counselors be posed with the idea that it may need to be a 5% water, 5% sewer.
And I think
And
that's a
that-
viable discussion. Instead of 3% every year, maybe we do 5% for 3 years and
Yeah.
then let it go.
Well, we can definitely look
But
at
but
that
at
as
least
well.
we have numbers now to compare what that would actually be.
I just don't think it will shock our public. It is the reality that we're in. Looks like there's a
Counselor
counselor.
I see
Fox,
a
do you
counselor
have
has-
anything for this discussion?
He is actually, Mayor, having problems with his sound and now he's lost video. So
You can't read
he's
this.
trying.
Counselor Fox.
On the open seas.
You have video, but no audio.
Read this.
I got reconnected.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Okay. So I lost the connection during the discussion. I heard most of it. I like the idea of rebates. I caution against lowering rates and then raising them again because that can raise hackles. However, rebates, that sounds great.
Well, we've got a lot more discussion to come up, but those are some good ideas.
I just want to make sure that the council is comfortable that we are waiting till September to have this full discussion.
Yes.
All right.
Given that we have a quorum with a shaky signal apparently, we're going to move back to the action items. Sorry for the confusion to everybody, but we're going back to the consent agenda. Item number 1 is the minutes for the June 14th, 2022 council. Any questions or corrections?
It's just the June 14th.
Is he somewhere?
Can you phone in?
Lost Counselor Fox, and we're back down to less than a quorum right now as we try to reestablish communication. Into the long subject and
Yeah.
again.
Nightmare. Windy Mountain.
Yeah.
Counselor Fox.
That extension is not valid.
We put a sign.
I heard Counselor Fox followed by that extension is not valid.
Can you hear us?
For this moment, I can.
Brought up question for any corrections or statements for the consent agenda, which
This
are
is not good.
you losing connection?
Your
again?
call has
Maybe-
been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Jesus.
Is it bandwidth that's the problem? If you turns off his video, it may not be so glitchy.
And you won't be using so much data. John, if you can hear us, try to turn off your video and just go audio. Counselor Fox, can you hear us?
You can see us right now.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, we tried. Tried.
That extension is not valid.
Tammy, if we can get a stable audio, I would love to be able to do the quorum stuff. In the meantime, let's go. Because the city charter can be an involved discussion, I'd like to pass it right now and move on to the finance monthly report from Tim.
Mayor, I'm wondering if we do the old fashioned way and just have him on the phone. I mean, we did that back before COVID.
Right.
You just have a phone on your.
That would be great.
Like I'm on roller skates a little bit.
You gotta be sitting here.
Yeah, right. I understand. Well, thanks for having me here. What we have is a finance audit
Your
report
call
for
has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
May of 2022, which is the 11th month of the fiscal year. It's been a very quick year, I feel like, but here we are. If things were perfect world, we'd be at 92% of revenues and expenditures, but as we know, that does not happen typically. Whole city revenues right now are about 4.72 million, which is 47%. And whole city expenses are about 5.17 million, which is 51%. We currently have approximately $867,000 in property tax revenue for the city, which is 97%. And being this is informational, I would love to answer any questions you might have on the report.
It's very important to point out that there are some big revenue items that came in June. So that throws the percentage off because we transfer the URA
Yep.
transfer over in June, which is $375,000, definitely will change the percentage levels.
That's correct.
The expenses, the same issue that we paid some bills or the outgoing on the URA.
I mean, we do pay our normal June bills and some of them carry forward after the end of the year. So, yeah.
Sir.
Councilor Raymond.
I would just say that we had a conversation that cleared up something that to me didn't look like it
Sure.
matched on page 97 and page 100, and Tim did a good job of explaining that. But when we look at water fees and sewer fees on page 97 being $1 amount and what percentage collected, and then we see on page 100 the water fund and the street fund and the collected amount and the percentage, they're different. And Tim was able to explain that the water fund includes fees, but other revenue such as interest and
SDC revenue, which can be a big one.
I think sometimes when we look at water fees and sewer fees, then we see water fund and sewer fund, we're thinking they're the same thing, but one includes other components.
Yeah, the user fees are the lion's share of the revenue, but there are other revenues that come in, interest, SDC revenue, and other smaller revenues. So if you ever look at that and trying to figure out why those numbers are not the same, they won't be. Or things are really, we have a real problem if that's the case. And they're enterprise funds, so it should be, a lion's share should be the fees.
Councilor Fox, can you hear me? We're just going over the financial monthlies, asking Tim any questions. Do you have any questions on the financial monthlies for Tim Gaines?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good one.
Any other questions for Tim? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Looking short.
Yes.
All right. Once again, I apologize, but we're gonna skate around and come back to the consent agenda. I had already asked the question if there are any comments or corrections for the consent agenda, which contains minutes of June 14th, 2022 City Council meeting. Are there any corrections or comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes, June 14th, 2022 City Council from the consent agenda.
I have a motion by Councilor Lehman and a second by Councilor McConnell to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And Councilor Fox says aye. It passes unanimously. Moving on. Hearing. At 8:02, I will now open the public hearing and hold the first reading of ordinance A163T, an ordinance adopting the Oregon Criminal Code, Oregon Uniform Controlled Substances, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code, repealing conflicting ordinances. Staff report, Chief?
Good evening, everybody. So this is a housekeeping. Should we do this every legislative session? What this does is it allows Coburg to adopt the Criminal Code, Oregon Unified Controlled Substance Act, Oregon Liquor Control Act, and the Oregon Motor Vehicle Code. So it basically allows us to cite into the Coburg Municipal Court. I do want to say on the addendum A, liquor is misspelled, but that would be corrected in the final version. And this is the first reading. If anybody has any questions.
Tammy, is there anyone signed up to testify for this? None. We'll close this hearing at 8:03. Second reading of ordinance A163T is scheduled for August 9th.
Thank you.
Public hearing. Thank you, Chief. Now open the public hearing and hold the first reading at 8:03 on ordinance A254. An ordinance declaring a ban on or a temporary ban on psilocybin service centers and the manufacture of psilocybin products. Staff report from Ann. Steve?
Yes, so this is a reflection of Oregon Measure 109, which legalized psilocybin programs in the state of Oregon. But cities have the opportunity to either ban these facilities or to do a temporary ban on the facilities. So the difference in that is that if you ban it, then there's no facilities allowed in the city limits at all, ever. If you do a temporary ban, it's a 2-year moratorium, which allows the city to look at their development code and decide if you really want to look at where do you want it? What part of town might you want it? What hours would you require that they work under? Things like that. So it gives you time to work out the details of how you would allow it. If you do nothing, then it will be legal in our community. So this, you have the options of 2 different ordinances to choose from to hold your first reading. Either if you ban it entirely or you declare a temporary ban, then both of those have to go to the taxpayers. So then you're approving for it to be put on the November ballot. happy to answer any questions you might have. I know I've sent the council out some information prior to this, so you guys kind of got up on this initiative. And so I hope that you were able to do that. So happy to answer any questions that you might have. This is the first reading. The second reading would be in August. And also in August, there would be a resolution that the council would approve that would place it onto the ballot, the verbiage.
Approve the ballot.
Approve the ballot measure. So, and Ann can talk a little bit about that if you have questions about that.
So is there dates as to how these facilities must be set up, like security and lighting and all of those things? Is that part of this, or we determine our own?
My understanding is that the part of the complication with the timing of all this is that the state administrative rules are not adopted and approved yet. So we don't really know what it's going to look like when those rules are adopted. So we have the kind of bare bones of the ballot measure that got passed, but we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like. So it's kind of hard for the cities to know what's going to be imposed on them next year if they don't ban it or do a temporary ban.
So if we do it, a ban on it, is there a potential that 10 years down the road, it could come back up for a different outcome?
I mean, even less than 10 years. Yeah. I mean, I would think that if you have something, if you're adopting something that's banning it, then 2 years or 3 years or 10 years down the road, the citizens could vote again and say, we're going to get rid of that ban.
Yep.
Basically, either way it'll go referred to the voters. We're just simply deciding how the measure will be written.
Right. No, not necessarily. I mean, one of the options is to do nothing, in which case the state law controls and you. So there's really three options. There's a
ban
complete ban,
or
temporary ban.
temporary ban goes to voters. Doing nothing automatically approves it.
It's already approved by the state. It's just the state's going to impose on us what that looks like.
Councilor Fox, do you have any questions? Thank you. Any other questions from council?
Reading correctly and going over what Ann had sent out previously, the new law allows for the manufacture, delivery, and administration at supervised licensed facilities. I have a question in my mind if a facility like Serenity Lane would ever utilize in the treatment of their patients. That's just running around in my head.
Yeah, they could possibly if they were a licensed facility. So, and to be clear, it's only licensed facility. Someone can't open a store and sell this. It has to be a very specific business that is licensed to provide this service.
Councilor Lehman?
Well, I would think Serenity Lane being a quasi-medical facility, if they had a doctor prescribing any psychotropic drug as part of the therapy, this wouldn't fall under that ruling. And maybe that's a clarification.
Say that again.
I would think that this measure excludes quasi-medical facilities where a doctor prescribes a patient a psychotropic drug.
I think that's exactly what it's for.
Okay, so this isn't necessarily like a recreational
No,
marijuana dispensary then?
That's how it's very different than the marijuana legislation. The marijuana legislation, you had the medical and you had the recreational, and this is very specifically geared toward, mostly mental health type issues that has to be a licensed facility that you go in and the person is a therapist or a psychologist or whatever, and they they're doing it there. They're not just saying, here, take it out.
Okay, so I misunderstood
Okay.
it then. I was thinking that this was actually allowing people to grow psilocybin or dispense psilocybin for recreational purposes.
No,
No, only for the medical purposes, and obviously it's gonna have to be, they're gonna have to allow the manufacture of it somewhere, because that's how they're gonna get the product, but that's gonna be very regulated also.
Was there some concern that the manufacturing of it could be a health hazard to the community and that's why it's a concern? Or, I mean, I guess if it's simply strictly a medical product, a pharmaceutical that's being manufactured and prescribed in a mental health setting, such as Serenity Lane, I don't have as much off the top of my head opposition to that, as opposed to what I was initially thinking it was some kind of sensory.
it's mushroom based. Psilocybin is mushroom based. So in my mind, and I think we have to wait for the state guidelines. Serenity Lane might be and I'm just using them as an example, they might be a licensed facility to necessarily be manufacturing there. Might there be a request for manufacturing site in the new grounds that we've just brought into the. Well, I think
It
those
could just
questions
simply
are,
be manufacturing facility.
the way
opposed
that
to dispensing it.
the way I understand.
Yeah, you probably know more about how they're gonna distinguish between the manufacturer and the dispenser of it.
Is there any history with other states or regions?
We're first.
Of course.
Oregon's first.
Yeah, so.
What you call being at the sharp edge.
So kind of what's the genesis of this coming from the state of Oregon?
I mean, I have a little personal knowledge about it. They've been doing studies for a really long time. Different colleges and institutions have been doing studies on the use of psilocybin for medical health purposes for a long time. It's growing.
So currently, there's just no place that manufactures it in the state of Oregon.
Well, because it's illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it
So
is-
people who have done it illegally.
Okay.
The
So
mental
there's
health.
not been any legal prescription for it.
Right.
Or
This is the
medical
first
treatment
state.
for it.
This is the first state that's
This
attempted
is
to do this.
still a similar issue as to where it's illegal federally, even in spite of Oregon legalizing.
Information, and then do we need to decide what will be presented at the second reading tonight, or?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, if you want it onto the November ballot, you have to kind of give direction on which ordinance you'd like to go with. Or, so
Is this just a hearing right now, or
This
is
is
this
the first reading.
first reading?
we could,
So we wouldn't be able to make a motion of tonight then.
No.
But it has to go on.
It
the
has to be
ballot one way.
adopted by our August meeting, right?
right. So if you, is there enough time between the 26th and the August meeting? So you could pass it and say, we're going to continue the hearing tonight to July 26th. Is that right, Ann?
Have we even opened the hearing yet?
Yeah.
We're just discussing it, right?
Yeah.
Staff report. So we haven't
Yeah.
had the hearing yet. but
Yes, we
should-
have opened the
The
hearing.
hearing is open as of 8:03.
So we can have the hearing, we can also continue the hearing if we want, or we can close the hearing and then deliberate some more. I think Ann's hope was that there would be some discussion about which way we're going.
Well,
Um,
we've been questioning, in my opinion, we're at the point where we're questioning the staff report, giving questions to the staff for staff report. But I still have to take the opportunity for public input.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So the other option that we haven't really discussed, and given kind of what I'm hearing, the reason there was this flurry for all the cities to adopt something was for the cities who were not wanting anything in their city. So what you could do is some version of the temporary ban that's a temporary ban to see what those state rules are going to look like. I mean, I haven't heard a whole lot of discussion about that, but I think that that could be something, a third ordinance that you could maybe look at adopting.
So here's a question about referring to the voters. You take either one. What if it doesn't pass?
Doesn't pass, then you're as if you hadn't taken any action. There's no ban. The fallback is the state's
Go back
gonna
to whatever the
state,
state. did.
yeah, measure 109.
This time, I'd like to see if there's anybody registered for public testimony.
Yes, we have Janelle McPherson.
Welcome to now.
And
State your
council.
address, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, get you to state your address first.
Okay. 90942 South Coleman Street, Coburg. Okay,
Go ahead.
all right. I'm not an expert. I don't know. I'm just learning about this. But I've been on the computer trying to learn. So, and if what I'm reading and hearing is truth, and if what I'm saying is correct, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing that it is a controlled substance, Schedule 1 drug along with heroin and LSD. And it's has a high potential for abuse. It serves no legitimate medical purpose in the United States. It is illegal, I understand, even in Oregon until 2023. If I'm wrong, you can let me know. It's illegal in Canada. There's a lot about it written from Canada as well. In fact, Dr. Zach Welch of the University of British Columbia in Okanagan, along with other several researchers from around the world, have done some study on it. But Dr. Welch says there is a need for further research, and I'm quoting, to more firmly establish the nature of relationship between the microdosing, mood, and mental health, and the extent to which these effects are directly attributable to psilocybin rather than the participant expectancies about the substance. And other places I've read that they're saying they need more studies. There's it's not used, of course, because it's illegal. It's got a lot of weird effects. Among a lot, like you would hear from LSD or heroin, hallucinations, sound and vision distortion, changes in consciousness, mood, thought, perception of people. In Alberta, Canada, from myhealthalberta.com, they say that you can build up a tolerance to those mushrooms after using it even 3 to 4 days, so that now you need to take more to get that high, so you become mentally dependent on it. It makes you feel like you need more, develops serious personal problems that affects the families and friends and your work and or school. And I would be for a ban in Coburg. I just don't think it's something that fits our community, let alone, Oregon, but I guess we're going to have it one way. And there's a lot of online talk programs out of Florida, even talking to people in Oregon. And the people in Oregon are saying, well, we don't really know anything for sure about its effectiveness, consequences of using it. So that's the end of my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Well, I'd like to state that I'm very concerned that we're the cutting edge. There's no place else that has the legality, the processes. And as she referred to, the research is still inconclusive. And that concerns me. I look at other things like our public safety responders. We do have a facility in town that there's a lot of people that could be potential patients for this. What's that going to do to our volunteer firefighters and our smaller police force if all of a sudden numbers start going up on those calls? And I know from personal experience with patients that these people can get pretty violent pretty quickly. And I just have some pretty serious hesitation of taking on something that a lot of people don't know a lot of. I just don't want to be on that cutting edge, because that just means one of these days you're going to end up bleeding. Also, Layman.
I commend you for doing your research and coming to speak to us about that tonight. I guess I'm still fuzzy about, is this still only going to be able to be prescribed by a physician? Or is there other avenues that people can access the psilocybin that is either manufactured or dispensed within our city?
Sounds like Councilor Bell has more information about the actual state measure, but the way I understand it is there isn't going to be an avenue for producing or dispensing outside of the really strict confines of physician.
Okay.
So just if in their staff report, the new law allows for the manufacturer, deliver, and administration of psilocybin at supervised licensed facilities only.
But that making that is nebulous, which would cause you to want to pause, because under those wording, it doesn't necessarily say it's a medical doctor or a psychiatrist. I mean, there could be rules that say a person with a 2-year associate's degree in health.
They do not have prescribing privileges.
Okay.
My concern comes from not so much the clinical side of it, it's the production side. And as you've seen with marijuana and other illegal things, psilocybin mushrooms are out there already. Like I said, I've personally experienced it as a medic. The patients, they're everywhere. And that's my concern, is production and distribution versus a clinical setting where it's being used hopefully under a controlled process that, you know, is safe as safe can be, compared to just allowing this to come in and us not having any background. Councilor Fox, do you have any questions or statements?
I think the answer is we don't know, because Oregon has not established its guidelines for how this will be administered.
But I also see if that's in the measure itself. I'm not sure what the scope of the rules address and what's already in the measure. But I'm pretty sure the measure, it says physician, and there's probably a definition of physician. So I mean, I can actually
So
look it up right now.
typically, if going to be prescribed, to have prescription privileges in the state of Oregon, you have to, there are rigorous rules that govern that. So it is a physician, it could be a nurse practitioner with prescribing ability. It isn't just somebody off the street, though the mayor is absolutely correct. This is already here, what this is doing much the same thing that I think the state of Oregon tried to do with marijuana and decrease the illegal and increase the legal and put it in a safer environment. Now, that remains to be seen whether that happens or how much of that happens or how it would be used. And I think that's what Ann Davies is saying. We don't have the guidelines from the state yet. My question is, do we have to, does staff need direction for something to bring back?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. If there's a definition, it's called a licensed facilitator, and facilitator is defined, and I haven't found the definition of facilitator, but it's going to have a definition of what that is, which will help people decide whether they think that's.
But do we have to decide on what's going to be brought back to our next meeting or no?
I think you can continue, I think you could continue the hearing to the July 26th meeting. And you can decide then, and in the meantime, perhaps Ann and I can provide more information than what we had available to us, but I think what I sent out initially to the council is what was provided to the cities through Locke. So.
But it would be
I don't
helpful
if
to
we're
know.
Making this more complicated than we really need to make it and delay it that much, because ultimately I see it going to the voters to make their decision rather than us doing nothing and it actually becoming law. So I think it's more what we're going to look at is temporary ban or a permanent ban. And it seems safer to be the temporary ban. So I'm not sure, in my mind, I need another hearing or reading on this.
And just to be clear, if you do the temporary ban, you could later come out and do the permanent ban. I mean, the only reason we're scurrying is because there are cities that don't want anything to be approved in that. If we have that temporary ban, you could then have a larger discussion of. And one of the other cities that was looking at doing one of these bans also looked to see what the voting percentage was on the actual state measure, which could give you some idea of where the people in Coburg are. I don't know if we have that.
Oh, on how Coburg voted? Okay. No, how the state voted.
56% of the state voted for it.
And they can
We
break
don't
it
know
down.
how Coburg voted for it.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to insert something here that's probably a little bit controversial, but my husband spent an 8-hour flight with a doctor who is studying this. And she gave him 8 hours of information on this. So he came home and did his own research. And it is something that actually could have real benefits depending on how it's regulated. So I think that we can't just assume that because it's unknown and we don't know what it will do, that information that we don't know, that we information we put out. But I would be very much in favor of a temporary ban just because we don't know. We don't have all the information that we need.
And I would agree with that. One of the concerns I have is a temporary ban versus a ban. I think this is a voter education thing that the city should be on top of to explain what a temporary ban does versus a ban, because a huge percentage of our city wanted a ban and there's nothing like that on there. They vote against the temporary ban. Then we're at the winds of the state because we didn't get it passed. So that's a concern of mine. Councilor Fox, you have any additional statements or comments? This is the first reading. At this point, I heard a continuance of the meeting. Anybody against a continuance? Means more information can come in from the public.
Well, so I guess that's what my question would be. Do you want to keep it open so that people can come in on the 26th and supply more testimony? Or do you want to close the hearing and then just have discussion among council? It sounds like you're saying a real continuance of. the
I
hearing.
heard two counselors mention continuance, so that's why I asked the question.
I don't need a continuance.
I don't either. People use continuance in different ways, which is why I asked the question is legally a continuance means that you're going to come back and you're going to take more testimony from the public, but you can close the hearing because you noticed it and people didn't, one person showed up. And so you can close the hearing and you can discuss it, or you can leave it open for the public to discuss more.
We'll come back for the second reading.
Close this public hearing. 8:31. The continuance of the, or not the continuance, the second reading of ordinance A254 is scheduled for July 27th.
26.
Vacation. Are we coming back with an ordinance declaring a temporary ban?
Three counselors say that, so I didn't
Okay.
say anything.
Perfect. We just, Anna and I just wanted to be very clear.
Does anybody disagree with that? Counselor Fox?
No.
Okay,
Temporary ban.
temporary ban. Thank you for the discussion. I think that was worthwhile. Okay. Let's take a small recess. 8:32. Let's try to get back.
Hey,
in
John, I
about
will call you
5.
right back.
Thank you.
Heat prostration when we go out.
I can turn up the.
No.
I mean, I don't know.
That's delicious.
I don't think I've had a meeting with this much.
I'm thinking it feels pretty good, because you're in shorts, John.
It was warmer.
It was very warm, yes. Funny,
The eardrum. So the mayor will be starting the meeting back up in just a minute. If you want to, you can also, if you can mute your speakerphone, you can watch us live on the live feed. You may be able to hear better there. You have to mute on your phone, on your cell phone.
Okay, right.
Mute sound. Invites out unless they want. Yeah, unless they request it. Okay, you got it. Gonna say, you picked up the packet the day after I sent it. That was good.
That's the 26th, right? John?
Ready to go.
All right.
Awesome. 2 weeks.
I came to a meeting.
2 weeks.
You turn that heat.
doesn't
make any sense. Says measure any non-required service centers not located within 100 miles. Has to be.
Big incident today.
Megan, are you available for the staff report?
Yes, I'm here. Are we ready?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Before you is a resolution to authorize 3 funding applications to the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization for 3 separate transportation projects. The first is the North Coburg Industrial Way pavement preservation. The second is additional funding for phase 4 of the Coburg Loop Path. And the third is a feasibility study for an east-west freight commuter connector road. The total for all 3 projects is $1,077,950. Does anyone have any questions?
Councilor McConnell.
The question about the Coburg Loop Path, what is the phase 4? Where will that be?
Phase 4 is on North Coburg Industrial Way from the pedestrian path that comes off of Sarah Lane up to Trails End Park.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that will be, I believe it's either 8 or 10 foot wide hard surface path up to the park.
Approve resolution 2022-18, a resolution authorizing application to the Central Lane MPO for the amount of $1,007,950. I still said that wrong, but okay, the total amount is $1,077,950.
I second that.
Those are big numbers. They always confuse me.
Motion by Councilor Bell and a second by Councilor McConnell to adopt resolution 2022-18. A resolution authorizing grant funding applications to the Central Lane MPO for an amount of $1,077,950 and delegating authority to the city administrator to sign the application. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Counselor Fox, your vote? Look up there. Okay, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Counselors, and thank you, Megan. Moving right along. Service. Staff report from Tim Gaines.
Hello again. What you have before you is a Finance Audit Committee recommendation for auditor services. Staff was directed by council to put together an RFP for audit services. We did so, had that together on March 18th. We sent it to 5 prospective auditors directly, as well as posted it in the newspaper and on significant websites. We received only one response, and that was from our current auditor, Umpqua Valley Financial, excuse me, get that out there. We reviewed it and we took it to our Finance Audit Committee on April 27th, where we were joined by Steve Teixeira from Umpqua Valley via Zoom. And they were able to interact with Mr. Teixeira for quite some time. And they have recommended that we retain Umpqua Valley for audit services. And certainly be happy to answer any questions about that piece of it, and then have some more information to share if there are no questions.
No questions.
Okay. I just wanted to add, we had a meeting with Steve Teixeira and some of his staff on June 29th. So I wanted to share kind of what we learned in that meeting very briefly. It was quite impressive. I have to say there was I think 9 or 10 people here from his staff, all new staff, no one I had ever met before. We also had 2 people via Zoom that were listening to our conversations. What he shared is really actually makes me smile. They're actually growing their business and they're looking to expand their business. A lot of the firms are either not taking, and I think this is why we only had one response, either they're not taking on new clients or they're flat just not doing government auditing. There's a lot of things that make it harder for a firm to do government auditing with the GASB rules and insurance requirements. And it just doesn't seem like a lot of firms are interested in really doing the service that much anymore. So we're somewhat lucky to have them. We're really lucky to have them, in my opinion. And the fact that they're growing, not just locally, they're wanting to grow nationally. 2 of the people, they were both CPAs in the group, were from Texas. They had relocated here to Oregon to go to work for Umpqua Valley. There were 2 I think they were like interns, and is that correct, from Portland State that drove down. So it was quite impressive to see that kind of support. And the other thing I remember Steve saying was they have more CPAs now in their staff than they ever have. So they've completely retooled. I just think they're going to be stronger. So I wanted to share that with you, just so you understand that they didn't get that in the report because it happened after the report was submitted, but it's very comforting and I'm excited. I'm excited to work with them. They were very obviously excited to be working with us too. I thought they were engaging, so it was a great meeting. And then I also, really quick, sorry. I typically look at what you all have done prior to my employment here. So I looked at the 2016 audit report for audit services, and there wasn't a motion in the report I looked at, so I may have dropped the ball on that. It would be nice to get a motion, and I've kind of written one if somebody wanted to make a motion to retain their services. I have one written, or you can make up your own motion, whichever you'd like to do, or you can decide not to make a motion at all. Just that I'd share that with you.
I do have a copy of it in my script.
I have a little guy here, but I'm just trying to help since I might drop the ball on that possibly. You want it? Okay.
Any other discussion for Tim? And then I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the city of Coburg approve the 5-year contract
Can I borrow that piece of paper, please? There's a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor McConnell to approve that the city of Coburg approves a 5-year contract with Umpqua Valley Financial CPA, EC for audit services.
Excuse me, Mayor, it's a 2-year contract. We normally retain auditors for 5 years, but we don't always do the contract for the full 5 years.
Let's take the 5 years out.
All right.
And corrected and then motion. Contract with Umpqua Valley Financial to provide audit services for fiscal year June 30th, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
And I will second that.
All right. So there's a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor McConnell to adopt and renew the contract with Umpqua Valley Financial to provide auditing services for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2022 through June 30th, 2024. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Counselor Fox, how do you vote? Thank you. Passes unanimously.
Just, sorry for the confusion, but thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
You bet.
Water easement buyback options. Item number 5.
Okay. So this item is regarding the water easements that the city purchased in 2007. At that time, the plan was to go up the hill on the other side of the freeway with a water line and connect to a water reservoir. As the council knows, that reservoir project is not feasible at this time. And so therefore, the easements to the water project are probably not needed. In May of 2022, I sent a letter out to the property owners asking if there was an interest in buying back their easements, and we did receive a very positive response back from the property owners. In 2007, the city council approved the staff to negotiate the purchase price of the easements. And while it seems like there was a percentage value that they started with, there were several of the properties that were obviously negotiated. So the standard was a 0.0023% of the value of the land only. But some of them were negotiated as high as 13% of the value. So they were paid handsomely for a couple pieces. The purchase price of the easements ranged from $1,000 to $57,000. An additional easement was purchased in 2019, and that was purchased for $2,000. So the total price that the city has paid out is $89,150. It's utilized in 2007. Again, it was based on the land, the lot of the land. It's a list of the properties and the easement values attached. The city has 3 options here. We can have an appraisal on each easement and sell back at the appraised value. You can use the same percentage of value when purchased in 2007 to figure out the current value because we do have access to the county assessor's records. or we can sell back the easements for the same price for which they were purchased. The challenge with number one is the cost of appraisals is over the top right now. And we would spend far more than we would ever collect probably on this. The challenge with using number three, is that the easements are actually owned by the taxpayers. And so the council has a fiduciary responsibility of utilizing market values in property transactions. So choosing two allows for the current value to be applied by using the same matrix as was used in 2007. If we were to be able to buy back them using that matrix, it could be up to over $100,000. So the other piece is that there was room left for negotiation between the city administrator and the city attorney and the property owners, so that every single easement didn't have to come back to the council to approve. We're asking for council direction as to which of the alternatives they'd like to pursue, and give staff direction. There is a motion provided for you in the packet. And staff recommendation is we use option 2 and allow for negotiations.
Councilor Lehman.
What's the total number of?
There are 7, I believe.
And what are my thoughts?
No, 8, I'm sorry. There were 7 initially and we purchased a new one.
One of my thoughts initially goes back to when we were talking about easements with the alleys, in that we did not want to give up our easements unless all the owners were in agreement to that. We didn't want to have a partial easement of an alley, all or nothing. Less valuable to us as opposed to a continuous easement. Having easement bought back by the property owner.
Yeah, I mean, for some of them, there's timber that they didn't really want to be taken down on their property, so that becomes important to them. Some of them have some infrastructure built that would have to be taken out because they weren't aware that there was an easement there when they placed it. I believe there's a tank in one of the easements. And some of them just simply don't want it on their property. And from the very beginning, when we started this discussion in 2019, they were saying, I'll just buy it back now. I really just don't want this to happen on my property. I don't see the value in the city buying back some easements and not others, but Ann can speak to that. I don't. And there's still a question out there that we've discussed is what would the city do with the easements? If we don't have a full purchase back from the property owners, what does the city do with the easement?
I just hope the city at least recoups what the amount was originally, but more now as well, especially for some timber involved. If everyone would participate.
It's a little, my understanding of your hypothetical, it's a little different than the alley situation, because these are like big pieces of property that just have a, line on a map that shows this easement. So getting one and not getting another is not gonna be the same issue that you have with the alleys.
So long as we don't ever have a potential need for it.
pretty clear that we can't do the project there, right? So.
Right.
Or many other projects.
Yeah.
I think-
Any other project?
Boulders, timbers and slide area that we found out afterwards.
You know, if the one that owns the largest easement is wanting to buy it back.
He did contact me and was interested in buying back his easement. He did not know a price at that time. Many of these people did not own the homes when the easements were purchased, and they just weren't aware they were there. For whatever reason, I mean, that it's part of closing on a property, but sometimes those things get passed. People that are purchasing properties, so they weren't aware the easements were even on their properties.
The recommendation is to buy them back using the current assessed market value. You said that you were going to be negotiating with them. So your point would be that you wouldn't negotiate something lower than that.
Some of them might not be willing to sell back at the same major or the same percentage that they were purchased for. And so then that would have to be in the negotiation. I'm assuming those would be the higher easements. The other easements are pretty small, and I don't see a pushback from those property owners on the small easements. But some of them are quite large, so.
Well, I would feel that if you get a reasonable amount back, it's better than sitting on it for years and years. And 30 years the city finds out because they forgot there's easements up there and we're still dealing with them. So if we could get some kind of reasonable settlement, I prefer the negotiation and not necessarily set too many limits on that.
No.
I'm suggesting that could be possible. You're looking at $81,000 worth of property. And we've been dealing with it for years. I'd say if we were able to get 81 back, I'd be happy with that. If we were able to get 75 back, I'd be happy with that.
Well, it was 89,000 originally, but with the inflation and the increase in the assessment, it could go for appraisal on it. Probably not that we want.
Not that I had
It's
the dollar
107.
amount, it's 107,000. If it was used, the same percentages were used.
Even then, I feel like if we get a substantial amount of the money back, I'm okay with that. I'd love to get more back. But I don't see a reason to surplus that and sit on it when we have an opportunity to maybe gain 85% of the value out of it and be done with it.
Except that one of the reasons for not choosing option 3 is because we have a fiduciary responsibility to use market values in property transactions.
Well, I think that would be a strong, that why we probably shouldn't start with just paying what we received or what we paid for them. You know, I think that was the point there, is that not looking at the fair market value, it would not be a service to the taxpayers. I think we need to be able to negotiate it, you know, and not necessarily just consider.
Well, and again, a fiduciary responsibility of getting the most we can so we can use it versus property sitting up there, $40,000, $50,000 worth maybe. They just sit there for years and decades maybe. We get nothing from it. If we're able to get money and put it into our budget, I think that serves the citizens well too.
Have you talked to all the property owners?
I have talked to 4. No, so their question was, what was the process for this to take place? And I have shared with them that this had to come before city council. and staff had to have direction in order to provide a process for moving this forward. So that is where it's been left with them. I've stayed in touch with them. They're aware that the council is hearing this tonight. And so that's where it's been left. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Look at the tax assessed values. That's what we would base our negotiations
Yes, so
on.
if you look at the spreadsheet that is attached to this, it will show you the original price of paid and the 2007 land value, and then the current market value and the current market value, and then the current easement value.
I would like to propose an alternative motion to the floor here. That would be to sell back the easements not less than the current assessed market value.
Definitely.
Well, the only point that I would make at that is that there are two very substantial easements and then there are some very small easements. So they're not apples to apples. And that's the only-
Well, and
The
what's
process
also-
and the approach would be equitable.
right.
What I think is also true, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the 2007 values reflect that there was some distinction in negotiating. And so
Yes.
that percentage that you see on one of them is much higher because they did a better job negotiating.
So really, my motion would be less equitable then in terms of not less than the current assessed value if there was something that was negotiated even much higher than what the current assessed value would be, or even much lower if it was a negotiation. So this gets kind of a little sticky.
Yeah. Because they probably do talk. to each other.
So sell back the easements not less than the current assessed market value or the purchased amount.
Less on the original purchase
Yeah, not
amount.
less than the current assessed market value or less than the original purchase price.
Well, you would only need the one. I mean, one's way less than the other. So the
Whichever is
current-
greater.
it's always going to be the current assessed value is always going to be greater.
Well, not necessarily. If you said it was a negotiation, they may have paid much higher.
Well, it's the current assessed value of the easement, though. Ann did the math to figure out what the current assessed value of the easement is based on the current market assessed value of the land times the percentage of the value of the easement to the land.
So if it was not less than the current assessed market value, it would always be higher than what they purchased it for.
We're not gonna cut down trees.
We might. But I have some easement, there's some leverage there.
Always come back with what their response was and then make an adjustment.
The suggested motion.
No, I think I would.
Are you ready?
No, is there any more discussion?
Well, I hope not.
There is no more discussion. I do have a motion. Okay. That we sell back the easements not less than the current assessed market value.
There we go.
And allow the city administrator and city attorney to negotiate sell price with individual property owners.
That's not part of the motion.
Pat,
Sell back the easements not less than the current assessed market value.
So in clarification, which would be the numbers that appear on the last column of this.
Right.
I did not look at that. That's the current assessed market value. Yes. That would be the 107,508.
And just make sure that you're clear that that is the market value of the easement portion of the property.
That acreage or portion thereof.
just to confirm, I have a motion. Approve the sellback of water easements purchased by the city for the water project. And sell back at not less than current market value.
Current assessed market value.
Current
Assessed
assessed.
market value.
Okay, there's a motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Fox to approve the sellback of water easements purchased by the city for the water project. And sell back at not less than current assessed market value.
Sell back the easements.
Motion by Counselor Lehman and a second by Counselor Fox to approve the sellback of water easements purchased by the city for the water project. Sell back the easements at not less than current assessed market value. Those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you, Counselor Fox. Passes unanimously. Okay. Number 6.
Douglas Fastnet.
Yeah, mine says 6 on my script, so. Item number 7, Douglas Fastnet ground lease agreement.
So this is to approve a ground lease agreement with Douglas Fastnet, DFN, and the city of Coburg. Douglas Fastnet has leased the broadband fiber optic lines from the Fiber Consortium to the city of Coburg. In order to begin providing services in the city of Coburg, they must construct a hutch, which will provide their central location for management of their systems. The staff have worked with DFN to try to identify properties within the city limits to locate the HUD. The Sarah Lane Water Booster Station was most secure and central location to the city. The proposed HUD will be approximately 10 by 12, and there is a drawing attached to this. It's not exact, but it would look similar to that. The HUD here would be smaller. The intent is to start the construction in September and complete it by November. And their intention is to be providing service to City Hall in November. Service to the community will be provided to neighborhoods with overhead lines first. They will then move to other neighborhoods as possible. It is anticipated that the cost of the service from DFN will be about $50 for 250 megabytes, and an introductory pricing of $65 after 12 months. The lease will grant DFN the ability to place the HUD at the Sarah Lane Water Tower, In exchange for the ground lease, they will provide City Hall with free broadband services. They will provide all equipment to hook up the city. They will be hooking up to electricity at Sarah Lane, and I will use approximately 1,000 kilowatts of power per month, which will increase the cost of our electricity there of about 125. The hut will be placed inside the perimeter fence of the water tower, and additional fencing will be around their hut. Agreement is very similar to the agreement that the city has with Hunter now. Right outside the back door here, there's a similar hut. The city was paid a one-time nominal fee for that. And the city pays about $300 a month for Hunter Communications, and we cover the cost of electricity to the hut. Addition, the city will be receiving franchise fees from DFN. So we did pass an ordinance that granted a franchise in the city of Coburg, and 5% of the annual gross revenue will be paid to the city. So the staff recommendation is the council approve the lease with DFN to place their hut at the Sarah Lane Water Booster Station. Now, the location of where it would be placed is out of the way from where the work on the towers would probably take place. It's clear far to the edge by the bike path. So if there's kind of like a gravel area there, just as you're coming into the booster station, and there's kind of a area that's kind of an empty area. I believe there's some concrete blocks stacked there now, big concrete barriers that Brian was going to move, but it is in a space that's probably not going to interfere with the operations of the water tower.
Is it going to be in the southwest corner, northwest corner? East corner.
So
I
right.
didn't get a copy of, I didn't get an illustration of it in my packet.
Oh, so it would be, you know, what, just as you enter the path on Sarah Lane, just as you start onto the back page that runs behind Serenity Lane, it'll be right on the corner of the fence right there. Right beside the water, the canal there. So south corner of the fence.
Mr. Muddy Creek.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think we got a drawing.
Oh, there was, should have been.
Getting one for us.
I think that there's a blank page that perhaps the drawing should have been on, but
It should have been in there. I apologize for that.
404 is blank.
There's actually an illustration of the hut, of what it will look like in.
Cost of power. Are we come out okay with, I mean, you said that would be about $100 a month?
100, so the value of the services they'll provide is 300.
Okay.
And so then we would be paying $125 in utility or power. So we would be coming out ahead, yes.
So there are 7 really good comments written on the side of this agreement. Doesn't seem like they're necessarily incorporated into the agreement.
I'm sorry, those were staff comments that we were kicking back and forth, and we probably shouldn't have printed this copy for you. You should have just got the original agreement, because we have answered all these questions. And part of these questions were for DFN. So these are kind of some of the questions that we worked through as we were writing this agreement.
Okay, because there are good comments that's not really reflected in the agreement we're looking at to approve.
I think they were comments that were questions like how much power is going to be used and how much space and what is the properly describe the equipment that you're going to put in. So
Or they also have conversation about landscaping. It's not addressed.
yeah, we did. There's no landscaping. So that,
This is a
that,
draft.
that was,
Please agree.
this is a draft agreement.
That's the
And
one we're
the
looking for.
comments have been
Approve
left in this, but the staff has worked through these. These are a reflection of the conversations that were taking place between myself and the city attorney, myself and DFN.
So I have a question about the service to the community will be provided to neighborhoods with overhead lines first. They will then move to other neighborhoods as is possible. What does that mean?
So we discussed this, I think, when we did the French agreement, that the city has really three. They have neighborhoods with no overhead lines, they have neighborhoods with no lines, and then they have a new neighborhood that's going in with empty conduit. And so obviously they're going to hit the neighborhoods they can. Neighborhoods that don't have conduit, they don't have overhead lines, there's going to have to be some kind of boring that takes place into that neighborhood. So that will probably happen last. But they will try to utilize everything, infrastructure that's already in place first before they go to those the choice of boring so that we
So
can.
does that mean, because it says September, well, start construction in September, complete by November, but does that include the underground or is that?
No, it means that in November, they will start installing around town
Well, it says service to City Hall will be provided in
in November. So City Hall will receive service first.
So there's absolutely nothing that says how long before underground will have service. So it's kind of
Well, in all utilities, as they buy franchises into the community, that's really up to them. I mean, they're selling their service in the community. It's, and it's the same with Hunter. The city brought Hunter in, and at that time, they thought, I mean, the thought process from reading staff reports and stuff is that Hunter would expand to the greater community eventually, and that didn't happen. And so we don't have control over what Hunter does, and we are not going to have control over what DFN does. They are telling us what they're going to do first is to cover the neighborhoods that have overhead lines.
That's fairly common.
Yep.
I have a lack of service that most all of the rest of the city gets because they stop at the end of the houses down. It'll never, because they would graciously bring that down for $18,000.
And I don't know if you have anything else to offer. Anne's very familiar with
Yeah.
this agreement with Hunter, but also she has spent a lot of time talking with DFN and is involved in the fiber
Yeah.
consortium.
And Jacob Collister is very familiar with DFN and has worked with them on all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I don't have anything to add legally, but DFN is serious about serving Coburg. Well, that's all I know, as opposed to Hunter.
I would just have one other comment under the termination clauses. And somewhat C and E are kind of opposition to each other. In C, they talk about Hunter shall surrender possession and shall remove all fixtures and equipment at their own expense. And it alludes to that again under E, where it says upon termination, DFN will surrender possession and shall remove all fixtures and equipment at their own expense. But if they fail to do so, then the equipment becomes ours. And I just have an experience in the past where a company left its fixtures and equipment to the school district under the same kind of clause. And we had $20,000 worth of our own expense to remove
Get
it.
rid of it.
So I would like to have a clause that says, you know, if the intent is no cost to the city and B occurs, it should add that if the cost is incurred by the city, that CFN shall pay the city for these costs incurred.
I think C says Hunter, so that is probably a duplication where DFN didn't get switched out.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, we like to take our own equipment out, and, but it costs us more money, and if we can just leave it for you, because the clause allows it to become our property and not their expense, then they leave it, and then we got, in this case, it cost us $20,000 to bring it back into our own usage.
Point.
That's a good point. Very good point.
It's called quorum. Decorum.
Any other questions?
Well, if the motion has the amended change,
Can you,
yes.
I didn't get the
Okay.
exact language, so.
So under E, the last sentence, we would add a new sentence. If the city incurs additional expenses as a result of Hunter DFN surrendering possession, comma, then DFN shall pay the city for these costs incurred.
They relinquished the property and left it, they would have to pay.
I make a proposal without the language, just with the amended. Really great for the additional language. Somewhere without the being changed. We make a motion with just saying the amended.
As amended.
That's amended. What would we go ahead and make that motion?
So we would like to combine C and E. And would be striking, because they're very similar. And just,
I think C needs to stay C on this. We just cross this out.
yeah, so we're just crossing upon termination.
Out of C.
And then, and we would move E up to BD with the additional language. That makes
As long
sense.
as the intent is that city shall be held harmless for any expenses if they terminate their.
Passes with it as amended.
Yeah.
Okay. And I move that the city council approve the city administrator to sign a ground lease agreement with DFN to place their fiber hut at the location of the Sarah Lane Water Booster Station. Amended.
Ground lease agreement
As
as amended.
amended, yeah.
Second that.
Okay. There's a motion by Counselor McConnell and a second by Counselor Bell to approve the city administrator to sign a ground lease agreement with DFN to place their fiber hut at the location of Sarah Lane Water Booster Station as amended. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Got this down now. Passes unanimously. Okay. Item 10.5, which was the red folder item for charter.
this out a little bit. So the staff has continued to work on the charter and met with the council, and we did have lots of great comments and questions. So we tried to address those questions and make changes as requested. As we continued to make the changes, it really became apparent to us that this charter was getting harder and harder to read. That it was becoming very complicated. And I had a real fear that it's going to be harder for the council to understand what we were doing. So after some discussion, we decided that we really need to start with a new charter and repeal the old charter. And we incorporated all of the Coburg-centric things in the charter that are there. And then we also incorporated all of those things that the council decided they wanted to see, decisions they had already made, and incorporated it into the new charter. And so what this provides for you is a new charter that incorporates all of those things that we've talked about. And the council has some time to review them.
Hello?
You don't have to review all of them tonight.
Sorry.
Okay.
We can still hear you.
So the council can have a week or so to review and then get back to me any comments or questions that you would have. But I will go over some of the changes that have been made and answer some of the questions. So starting with what should go into a city charter. So we did provide an explanation of what should go into a city charter. It's a basic document that defines the organization, power, structure, and functions and essential procedures of the city government. It's compared to the Constitution of the United States. It forms a legal foundation for all of the local government operations. And it should surely clearly define the powers and duties, compensation, eligibility, qualifications, and fulfilling vacancies. It should provide direction on high-level decisions that the council might have to make, how meetings are conducted, and charters are unique to cities. So if you look up the city of Cresswell or the city of Cottage Grove's charter, they're going to be different than ours because Coburg is different. So that was one of the questions that was asked. What defines an officer? Officers can be paid, an paid employee or a contract employee. Generally, the officers of the city are elected. City administrator, manager, city recorder, and judge. Some cities do have their legal attorney as well. We discussed that at length. The issue with it is what I think that cities have their city attorney in their charter when the city attorney is an employee of the city. And one reason why you would not do that when they're not an employee of the city is because officers are named in lawsuits. And so if Anne is an officer of the city and she's named in a lawsuit, then it gets real messy because then LCOG is suddenly named in a lawsuit. So that it's a good reason why to not have a contract employee in our charter unless, and if they're a staff member, then that's different.
And
Yes, sir.
the sentence is a little hard to follow, but generally the officers of the city are the elected city administrator. So when you say the elected, you're talking about city council members?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
mayor.
And mayor. Yes. The mayor is the executive officer of the city and the only executive officer of the city. So the current version of the charter lists officers as the municipal judge, city recorder, and treasurer. the proposed version removes the treasurer and adds the city administrator. We've provided, so there's a lot of language in the new charter that adds the city administrator. We've aligned that language with the ordinance that created the office of the city administrator, A250. And that's included in this packet. And so the council would want to think about whether you just want to work with the ordinance and repeal A250 or just leave A250 in place. And that's purely a council decision. The municipal judge, the court and the judge, we talked with the judge and the recommendation, the only recommendation he made for changing the charter is that he be able to appoint a pro tem judge. Because in the event that he could not show up to court on a day that court's planned, he needs to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody to replace him. That's not going to give council enough time to do that. If he couldn't do it, and it's like, if we were to lose our judge unexpectedly entirely, then absolutely the council would be in the position that they would have to appoint a pro tem judge. City recorder duties are explained a little bit broader in the new charter. The mayor's duties are clearly defined under governance. And it clearly defines the governance of the city. Compensation was one area that the council discussed and decided that they did not want to prohibit a salary being paid to the mayor or council. So that has been taken out. Other changes includes the options for taking recesses as the council gave direction, and votes required. So the current version of the charter contains confusing language about how votes are counted in an event of absent. I was getting tired of talking. And so it's confusing language that we're proposing just to be removed, and a clearer explanation is provided in the council rules. So the general rule that's being put forth in the new charter is a majority of the quorum of the council is necessary to decide a decision.
And a question. I haven't heard of city council members and they're being paid before. Is that happening?
Oh, yeah. Happens.
Because
A
I've
lot
heard
of big
mayors, but not
cities,
city council
a lot of
members.
bigger cities they pay stipends. So been doing some
Stipend-
research on that a little bit.
stipend, same as- I distinguish a stipend from compensation, but maybe they're not. Compensation seems to be a monthly amount salary. Stipend tends to seem to be kind of varies.
So when we were looking at it, and we all had discussed it a little bit.
Yeah.
Will or you will not, and there would have budget process.
Okay.
So a vacancy season office, there was a lot of talk about what creates a vacancy, especially about the counselors missing meetings and how many meetings could be missed, and that the council gave direction on that, and that is reflected in the new charter. So there were other small changes that were presented to council that there was really no question or discussion on, and so they've been incorporated into the charter. So the election timeframe is in the staff report. The first reading of the ordinance, and we're taking out amending the charter because we're not going to amend the charter. It's a new charter and a repeal of an old charter, but it needs to take place at the special meeting on July 26th and the second reading and adoption on August 9th. Then that would put it on the November 8th ballot. So again, the council has some time to go ahead and take this home and read it and forward any questions you might have. It would be really helpful to me if you send those by email, because my plan is that I will share all of those in the next staff packet. So any comments or concerns that counselors raised, the other counselors will know what that was. And additionally, there will be a resolution that needs to be passed in addition to the ordinance. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I think that you're going to find this document so much easier to read and make sense. I am really pleased with it. I think both Sammy and I took a sigh of relief once we got it all into one together into one piece, because it just was so much easier. It flowed better. And I think it's going to be so much more useful to you.
It just makes sense. I know I look up Mayor Powers often, and there's like 3 different locations that my powers and abilities are listed in the old charter. And you'll see in the new charter format where our job is broke down into the 3 different elements. And everything is grouped logically. The elections and how they're dealt with, our vacancies in office. But the biggest part is the governance part that is really straightforward form of government, council, the powers. And I think when you read through and compare them, please make the notes and get them off to Ann, because if we've got to get this in the November ballot by August 9th. Work. I know we were looking at this, and Sammy came up with one of the first statements of we've got to change this charter in this group back in 2014. And that was one of my goals when I became mayor, to update this charter. Taken 6+ years, but hopefully we're almost there. Well, I do by decorum have to ask Councillor Fox. It is 9:40. We have one more item on the agenda. We have one more item on the agenda. Is there anybody opposed to continuing to fulfill the agenda?
It's the item.
No.
Administrative monthly report. Hearing none, we'll move forward with the administrative monthly report. Do we have any questions for Ann?
I don't want to keep you, but I just want to tell you that we did do a presentation for the park grant today. Not very well. Presentation and discuss it. It could be as late as September. Sometimes it take a while.
Bullet list in the red folder. Item 11.
This, I can find item 11.
Council.
Can you send John the red folder items?
was in there.
Just a reminder to council that everything that I've sent out to you during the month is in this packet. Calling special attention to the legislative priorities. If you haven't taken a look at that, Councilor McConnell got right on it and turned in her priorities. And that those we will want to be submitting by the deadline. Have a little bit of time left to do that.
Questions for Ann on the administrative monthly report?
Send me another copy.
I can give you one, but. Put it in this stack of papers.
Hearing no other comments or questions, I do want to make a statement that I appreciate that the counselors are volunteers and they give their time freely to the city. And tonight was a hectic night trying to get a quorum. I appreciate Counselor Fox working from work to help us get a quorum and get this business through. So kudos to Counselor Fox and thank you for your efforts. It's okay, life matters.
I will say.
Amy is shaking her head yes, very definitively. Ned, are there any final comments from counselors? None? We'll adjourn this meeting at 9:43. Thank you, counselors and staff.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John.
Where experience comes in.
Experience happens,
Yeah.
We'll just leave it. I know, it's like that dish up on top of my house. Look at that. And with the owl that's bouncing around, you did great.
Thanks for that. A couple of options. Both of them should be.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Really nice.
I'm gonna take it.
Be gifted back.
I'll have Brian look up.
All right.
what time it is last time.
You want to
Okay, I'll have him look it up.
I was thinking the same.
Casper cutting things that I'm not gonna
I know.
put it.
It's
It's like we're.
Especially because
I have a huge hydrangea in the front.
Give me no cold fries. damn it.